Blessings and shalom. Blessings and shalom. Yahuwah, thank you for this morning that you have awakened me, awakened my family. May you be with me on this live. May I communicate according to your purposes and will and not my own. Though I am just here to talk and not really minister anything, I still know that words and conversation could lead to such. So let your Ruach guide and direct. Let me be willing to pull back on things that may conflict or go against your will. So I thank you for that. Blessings again and shalom. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to get started. I want to pull it up on him. There it go. Well, it's all good. Well, I kind of want to ramble a little bit or discuss and deal with Vantage point. Me usually pointing out things comes from a perspective of what has went on in my life, and I'm trying to get away from that a little bit, not because I don't see it as effective, but I really don't know if it actually relates to a large amount of people or to everyone that maybe I'm meant to speak to. One of the issues comes about because a lot of my experiences are far off. A lot of things that I've been through far as my sin life, way off. I've been married for 18 years, and so it'll be 19 coming up in March. So when most people talk about things that deal with, I guess, single relationships, I have not a clue. I am completely clueless to the matter. And honestly, I do a disservice, I think, now that I look back at it when I talk on certain things, because I come from a perspective of a great marriage, and a lot of people are dealing with confusion and stuff like that. And though I had a previous marriage that was not that great, I'm so far away from it that I may not have the compassion and empathy needed for that person's moment. You know, they're right in there in the mix, and I'm actually watching from a distance. I'm not actually seeing it, head on, because it's not my situation, it's theirs. So though I speak on a situation, I may sometimes seem insensitive to them, I guess, though that's not what I'm trying to do. Um, when it comes to marriage, I was talking to a young man, and basically he was mentioning how out here in the world, the dating scene and everything, how there are not many virgins or whatever, so there's not a possibility to have the Hebrew marriage that the scriptures has designed. And I'm like, that's hard to consider, because when I was younger, there were a lot of virgins and things of that nature. But now, I guess, unless someone is dealing with someone that has a structured home or whatever, like, okay, I believe my youngest daughters to still be virgins, but of course, I don't want to set them up for marriage with just anyone. I want to actually be the one to arrange their marriage. So I don't want them exposed to certain things so that they could lose their virginity. And that may be even, seen as controlled or overreaching by many. My first set of children as a parent, I definitely see a lot of things now that I was overreaching. I believed in corporal punishment, which I still do, but maybe the way that I married it, or I went about doing it, was a little bit harsh at times, and not as if I was abusing them, but there may be times that I probably should have talked with them more so, even though they tell me I lecture all the time. So I don't know if they would have heard that but a lot of times my presence and that I could be a threat to them would be used. And that does not culture a relationship all the time of respect, just fear. And that's not what I desired. That's not what I wanted. That's what I was raised up in. And so, of course, I did not want to foster that similar relationship with my children. Yet, in a way, I did. My youngest don't have that similar notion. They don't fear me. There's a greater level of respect. And of course, corporal punishment really is not something that's used and has not been used for a while, but they know that I can or I'm capable of, but I've never used that as a threat or anything. I rather talk with them. And so that's a difference from my vantage point. I had the vantage point of how I dealt with the older children, and it affected how I guess, relate to my younger children. I have two sets of stair steps. You know, vantage point gives you a different perspective. When you're right there involved, a lot of times you don't see everything around. You see what's right before you, and it's good to have others on the outside to speak on that. Dealing with marriage, I have friends that were seeking marriage, and a lot of times would invite them to come around. Seeing that I've been married so long, yeah, there are things that I don't know about this modern day and time of what's going on out there as far as the dating scene and everything, but there very much are things that I could help as far as knowing what went wrong in my first marriage, and I can notate those things. A lot of times when people get married, they, still hold on to their single freedoms. When it comes to being around the opposite sex or those that may be interested in them, it's like, okay, I'm not going to do anything. So, this is not a threat or not a problem. But yet, out of respect, sometimes you have to navigate out of relationships or away from relationships that you're comfortable with, because those people actually have the desire to be with you. Though that's not on your mind, the threat is very apparent to the person who's seeking to marry you. And they see that. They see your comfort with this person, and a lot of times that draws them to be uncomfortable as well as insecure. And if this person is actually a person that could be a rainy day, situation where if things are not going right, they could be your backup plan. That may have nothing to do with your ideas and plan, but if you're truly going to get married, I'm not telling you to get rid of everybody, but when you have a competing voice, a lot of times you won't do what's necessary to support what you're saying is your goal. You won't give it your all because you know that there's always one waiting in the wings. That in itself is a negative thing to have going on, but there's a lot of times people, they get comfortable and a lot of times cocky or arrogant to think, I'm not doing anything wrong. And no one's saying that you're doing anything wrong, but think about the respect aspect. Would you like the person that you're involved with or that you're seeking to have an involvement with having someone on the wayside or the backup plan? No, most people would not like that, but yet they arranged and set the situation so that's how it is for them, and they don't see the issue. Here, me and my wife, me and my children could be at home, and maybe one of her friends come by. I could leave them with the children and maybe go in another room or whatever. But if my wife's not here and the children not here, that person does not come in the house. Opposite sex. It doesn't matter if I see them as family or friend. If they're not actually family and there's a possibility of intimacy or whatever, even if there's not an attraction, no, they don't come in. And that's just a respect thing. If I have a woman riding in my car, I have to let my wife know ahead of time. It's many times when I was a part of a ministry back in Christianity, as an usher, sometimes they would ask us to take women home, and I would have to definitely ask my wife first am I okay to do this? And let her know where I'm at, and keep up with contact so that she knows that nothing is going on outside of my responsibility as an usher. Now that wasn't something that she mandated, but it was something that I wanted to have there as a failsafe, knowing that I'm a man and I've had a previous marriage where I had an affair, so I did not want to bring that into my situation, and love to have some guardrails or things in place so that I was protected, or that I would choose the wiser choice. Now, since I spoke on, back in the days in Christianity and things of that nature, the vantage point I had then is that I was walking the right way and that I knew what I was doing. But as time progressed, I became more connected to my Hebrew heritage and culture. And so now I see that the vantage point I had then was flawed. It did not leave opportunity for growth. When you get to a point where you say, I got it, where are you going to grow? So right now, even as a Hebrew, walking in this culture and heritage, I've since getting sick pulled back from saying I got it. That was something that I was, firm on. I got it. I don't have it, and I'm okay not having it. It doesn't mean my faith is waned. No, my faith is that as I walk day by day, as I endure to the end, I'm getting it more and more, but I don't have it. I'll have it when it comes to the end. That's when I'll have it. When I basically finish this race, when I endure to the end, that's when I'll have it. I'm grabbing at it. I'm working towards that. It's not done. It's not finished. And so why act as if it's finished? Why have the confidence and boisterous talk on it as if it's finished? This thing is going to be constantly adding to my vantage point, adding to my perspective. And so I'm willing to hear other thoughts and other things that maybe I rejected in the past. But those things will not take over where I'm at, but they're, things that I can sift through and say, okay, I'll take a little of this, I'll take a little of that. Basically, I'll chew the meat, spit out the bones, as some say, or I won't throw out the baby with the bathwater. However, you could say all of these different, you can say all these sayings, but I want to do better. Being sick has you actually had me, because see, everybody doesn't go through the same process. With me, I reevaluated and started saying, okay, let's be different than we were before. And I'm like, we as a household, though my household is great, I'm the head. So where I lead, it affects the whole house. So I want to be an agent of forgiveness. So if there are many people that I've had oughts with or issues with, and my functioning now is, hey, it's too big for all that. So I don't have a problem with a person distancing themselves from me or whatever, if that works best for them. And that may be something that I may have to do with some people, but that doesn't stop that I have love for them. And I'm not going to allow someone to dictate that I can love them or not love them. That's not on them, that's on me. So even if the relationship has an end, if I choose to love them, from a distance, I will. I will remember the moments that we had, and I'll choose to do that, and they have no say in it. What I decide to allow in my head is on me. So if I allow the hurt and pain to stay and have residence in my head, that's on me. But if I would want to remember the better times and just, pray or believe that we'll meet in the hereafter, or, meet in the end, so be it. I want people to basically get their stuff together, just like I'm trying to get my stuff together. And so sometimes we can't do that together. Cool. You know, there are so many things that land in the land in the decision making and the choice making aspect of life, where people make choices and those things affect. I had a friend come by and he was inebriated, obviously, but this is someone I love. But the better choice may be not to have him around my family. That doesn't stop that I love him, but he has a choice. He's made a choice that alcohol is a part of his life. I have people that have drugs that are part of life, and I have to look back and say, okay, those things were things that I did back in my 20s or around that age or before, and I had no issue with it then. But now my responsibilities and who I am, they don't fit. It's not that the people don't fit, but their choices don't fit. And so I have to make the better choice to protect not just me, but my family. And so I don't want to cut off anyone, but some situations do not allow for me to be the steward of my home to the best of my ability. And so I got to protect this house, this sanctuary. I have to walk in the ways of Yahuwah, and I don't see those things as such. Not saying that I'm the judge to say things are bad, that people can't maintain and deal with it. But I see the difference in attitude and demeanor that people carry when they are on those things. And honestly, I don't like I guess, the term I can't think of, but they're wild cards. You don't know if they're going to be up or down, and it's hard to gauge where they're at. And I don't want them to blow up or lose control and I not be able to cover my family the way that I want to and desire to. So I make the choice to navigate away from that. Love them, love them, love them. Be there in the time. Maybe I could go by myself and enter into situations with them or whatever, but my family is too important to me, and I'm a steward. I'm the watchman of this household. That's my first ministry, so I'm not going to allow those things to have a negative impact. Now, the vantage point could be that, seeing from them that I'm turning away from them and that I don't love them, but that's not the truth for me. I have a different perspective. And that's one of the things that I'm learning, that people are able to have different perspectives, and you have to allow that. It's good to see people's perspectives and their vantage points so that you can have sensitivity, you can empathize, all those things. Because as a minister, Yah sees everything that's going on, and he sees the different angles. When you look at the situations that occurred all through the scriptures, one of my favorite ones is Abraham and his fathering of Ishmael. Okay, Ishmael was by Hagar, not his wife, and Ishmael got pushed to the side. Ishmael getting pushed to the side, and basically Yah having to step in and say, okay, I'm going to take care of you. Your nation's going to come out of you. But he got nothing really from his father to start off. His father had to place him to the side because it offended Sarah how Hagar, mocked her, And so that child raised up having a father but not having a father. I had a father but didn't have a father, and I know how it did me. Now, I've had relationships with my relatives where we at the same level, and I see them treated better, and I know how that affected me. So you have him having his brother Isaac staying in the home, being blessed, and everything is going to be left to him and everything. You have a atmosphere for jealousy and envy to come about. And if you read through it, you see that that occurred. And is that all the way on Ishmael, or is it on the father in the setup? And you know, you can have all different type of perspectives and vantage points on that, but it's important to look at it all ways, and then have the sensitivity to say, okay, this happened, and it can happen to anyone, and how do you move forward from it? You know, as you see later on, Abraham died and they both buried him together. These brothers that had, obvious issues between them came together to bury their father. That right now and nowadays, you see many times when a parent dies, there's a fight for the family house, fight for the family monies or whatever. And us being who we are, descendants of, of kings, but also, coming through slavery, a lot of times we don't have much. And so when we see available resources, we go at each other for it. We fight like rats for the cheese or whatever. We be at it with each other over this little bit of parcel of something that, if you really be truthful, is not much. I've seen people fight over $10,000, and $10,000 in the gist of it, you can make $10,000 easily just working at McDonald's. That's not worth losing a relationship for life with a sibling. But of course, people have went there, and the lack of trust in the relationship is done off of that moment for $10,000, and $10,000 really doesn't go far at all. Okay. All right. I'm rambling, so I'm gonna hit some topics. Sex. Sex is best in the context of marriage. I believe that we have actually dropped the ball, seeing that being fruitful and multiply was a command given to Adam and Havah, or most call her Eve. So if that was a command, it should have been something that ministry, or those that read the scriptures, use or discuss about. They should talk about these things. It should be communicated, and it should be something that's taught from the perspective of the scriptures, and not the perspective of the world. You see sex education given to children and stuff, and that be their first introduction, or something that occurred. They seen out of place. Me, I as a child, I saw porn and, seeing other things around. And those things give forth a perversion. It don't give a proper perspective. See, most people, when they look at sex, they don't see it as something that is a gift towards married people. They see it as something for pleasure. Yes, it procreates and makes children, but it's more so seen as a right of male and female just for enjoyment and pleasure. And so with abortions and Plan B and everything, they get rid of the being fruitful part and multiply, and just enjoy just the pleasure of it. But that's not the purpose of it. That's something that's involved in it. That's part of the gift. But being fruitful and multiplying was the bigger part of that. That part right now is not the focal point at all. And so now self-gratification, any type of excitement and enjoyment comes about. You have things that set in motion that can't procreate. Male and male can't procreate. Female and female can't procreate. A lot of this stuff, using toys, that can't procreate. That is not what sex was, made for. Those are perversions. Self-gratification, masturbation. But me being married 18 years and having a wife that does not deny me, I really have a poor vantage point of what's going on in this world. I really do. My first marriage was a difficult one, sexually and everything. But prior to that, I was out there just doing whatever. Before, when I was in my 20s, doing whatever. And so now, doing whatever looks a lot different than what I was dealing with. There are so many things coming into play. I'm like, I speak on it a lot of times, but someone had to let me know that your perspective is limited. And the fact that you've been married for 18 years, you don't know what's going on out here, and it's hard for us. And I'm like, yeah, I can see. Like I say, I look around and I wonder how many virgins are there. Even though I proclaim the virgins in my household, I'm just like, okay, how many are out there? And if we're supposed to return to the Torah, a man seeking out a virgin for a wife, where would he seek? This world, that a woman having experience is a normal thing. It's kind of expected almost, and it's like the treasure of virginity is not seen, it's not viewed, it's not valued as much as it should be. Or if it is valued, you still have someone that wants that virginity, but they're not looking for marriage. So that virginity is seen still for gratification. It has nothing to do with breeding and bringing forth to the kingdom and its dominion. That's not what people's focus are, because most people think sex is just about gratification, and we allow that because TV shows it, movie shows it, almost everything we deal with shows the gratification part, but it does not show the commitment. It does not show the valuing of your mate. You don't just take, but there's a respect, as well as saying, okay, my body is yours, your body is mine, and so I'm going to give this to you joyfully, not begrudgingly, not not in a hostile takeover type situation, but this is due to the love and to the commitment, the covenant. This is not free for all, but yeah, I'm gonna move on from that one. And then my vantage point and perspective, I work around majority of Caucasians, so I see the unfair imbalance, but most of them, they act cool, but they don't really acknowledge that they have a benefit, or it's almost as if the difference in pay scale, the difference in levels is almost, this is normal, and it's nothing that they really invest time in thinking about. That, okay, this person is intelligent, but yet they're not receiving the same benefit from that intelligence. And most of the people that have the higher pay rate and things of that nature usually are legacies or related to someone, and that's what benefited them and got them to that position. Not their intelligence, not their work ethic, none of that. And so racism is a little bit different. I've heard about a lot of the stuff going on in the South and stuff like that, but I'm not in the South, I'm in Michigan. And so it's like, it's different. I don't have a hate towards Caucasians or whatever, because I have Caucasians in my family that I love and everything. But, it's still, I see the difference. And I sometimes wonder, what are their conversations when it's just them and no one that looks like me? And I have to, kind of pull back from that, because, of course, I don't want to find a reason to, have disgust or dislike towards my family members. They're related to me. But I still, would like to know the vantage point. And in truth, because I do believe that a lot of people, when they look at the audience and they make sure to say things that does not offend the audience. And I just want a true dialogue. Even if it has some harsh words or whatever, I want a true dialogue. Really, I don't think I'll ever get that, but, sometimes, I really like that. That was one of the things that people hated. I did not like Trump, but I liked that he said what he said. So I didn't have to, guess where he was at. I knew where he was at. Even though I didn't like it, I knew where he was at. So it was not like it was going to be anything that surprised me that he did. I was well aware that he was who he was. I didn't have him, befriend me or get up close to me and then stab in the back. It was none of that. It was just basically, okay, I know not to give him my back. I know not to trust him with my back because that's who he is. Okay. Vantage point, perspective, assembly and camps. Right now, I'm not a part of an assembly or camp. I started off in an assembly. Um, I've connected with a couple of assemblies, and I'm still friends with a lot of assemblies. I still associate with an assembly, but I really start seeing that from my vantage point, didn't look many look it didn't look much different than the Christianity denomination situation to me. It looks very similar. That you're either with us or you're not. And I'm like, I'm with Israel. So what does it matter if I'm with this assembly? I've never been in a camp. I kind of started off with a negativity looking at the camps, but then I see some of the good stuff or whatever, but my vantage point of the camps come from the outside, so I don't know what's going on there. And so when I seen how they went down to the border of Texas and everything down there in Mexico and helped out, I had all these negative thoughts towards them, but I seen that they showed up and showed out during the time of Sukkot. And so I'm like, okay, my perspective is based on what I've seen and heard. I don't have the true experience, so I'm like, I'm not rightfully judging this, so I'm going to take my mouth off of them, and that's what I've done. I still don't agree with a lot of things that they say. A lot of times I feel like they're hostile, they're anger, they minister out of anger, but hurt people hurt people. So, hopefully they come up out of that part or whatever and have a little bit more compassion, but, who am I to say? I'm not the guide or director of their lives, but I do hope that they get through, that point, because I can see anger as definitely intoxicating. When I felt like I was betrayed and stepped on and stuff like that, I very much had anger. I did not feel like I was lashing out, though I ran it here and there. I did not slander or go at nobody, directly, but I see how over and over a lot of these these moves we make, they look very much similar to the past moves and the denominations and the cognitive dissonance that we had in Christianity. I see it going on right now in this Hebrew walk, and I'm like, I don't want to re-enter into what I got out of. I got out of that. I don't want to re-enter in it. I don't want to go back to Egypt, and that's what I feel like it is. I don't mind fellowshipping with folks, but I don't know if I want to have a brand or a title over me. You say they can say, oh well, you started One Vision Ministry, but that's basically my home setting. I don't plan or see myself as leader or moray over anyone directly. Anyone that I've taught or that I work with or whatever, I've shared them with others. I'm like, the two that I immersed just this past summer, what I've invited them to fellowship with Great Awakening Flint. Many may remember I used to be the only moray of Great Awakening Flint till I let that go, and I actually help out the person who's moray of Flint now. As I fellowship with them. I don't have no animosity towards Great Awakening. I don't have any animosity towards the Flint situation. And so I'm putting those that I still have responsibility to cover right there in the mix of that, because, hey, fellowship is fellowship. We are Israel. That matters more than anything, not our brand and our label. And I deal with them, and I'm planning on keeping on dealing with them, unless they ever, try to put a definitive, you have to be a part of this to be a part of this, then I'll step away. But as long as it's not, the fellowship is there. We're all Israel, and the love is there. It's true, genuine love. Elder Saul is my brother. He's my friend, and he's not my replacement. He's not my enemy. He's my friend. He's my Ak, my brother, and he's the elder. I respect him. I enjoy talking with him. I love this man, and I just met him. You know, but I love him, and I'm thankful for the relationship. I love my Aunt Craig. I love my Aunt LaRue. I love Dr. Howard. I love Dr. Howard. I wish nothing but the best for him. Want him to succeed in all that he does. That man has taught me so much. I believe I've taught him some. You know, but we're all Israel. We're connected by Israel. The assembly title doesn't mean, I ain't gonna say it doesn't mean anything. It means something. But to me, I don't need that to have a relationship with you. Josh and Morris over there in Rebirth. That was some of the first ones I followed, and I still love them. Respect them greatly. There are so many out there. I follow a lot of people. But I don't have to be associated with an assembly to have a relationship with people. And I'm not trying to set a model and have people, oh, I got to leave the assembly. No, I'm not asking that. I'm not saying that. But I do believe that there should be cross fellowshipping, that we should connect with one another because we're all Israel. When we come together, it's going to be, if any division or any separation, it's going to be by tribe. It's not going to be by assembly. The assembly names are going to fall off in the kingdom. That's not going to even matter. Not at all. Just like other nations that come in, they're going to be possessions of Israel. And so their nation titles are going to fall off of them. So if you know these things, I don't understand, I don't comprehend why someone functioning like that now is a problem. I really don't. All right, I spoke on it a little bit earlier, raising children and the perspective of that. Man, this generation got it hard, especially when you're having out of wed marriage. You could connect with somebody, and oh my goodness, the vantage point of that and the perspective is, whew. Being a Hebrew, not eating pork, not eating shellfish, and none of the scavengers. You could be with someone and they be in a full agreement with you while you're in a relationship, but yet you're not married to them. And when that, if that separates and there's never a marriage, there's a joint parenting going on. And yes, you have the philosophy and the mindset, okay, no, none of these things. But if they go back to those things, what can you do? I was talking with my son and I was just like, hey, just imagine someone going to pick up their child, and they're a Hebrew of all Hebrews, and their child approaches eating a sandwich, and they get in the car and it's bacon. Child just enjoying the sandwich. What do? Smack the sandwich out of their hand, or take it away, or argue with them? And I'm like, yes, it's known their stance by the parent that sent them out with that sandwich, but they don't care. And so that in itself would set the parent off, or could set the parent off, that has that stance. And in them being set off, it could cause a harm to that child where, what are you doing? Or, and that child rather not be with that parent off of them, just standing to their convictions. The games that are played in relationships are serious, but why would you procreate with someone and don't have agreement? And I'm like, wow, I did the same thing. But I'm like, man, this lifetime right now we're in, with all of this stuff going on, that is more serious than ever, that you could be with someone that has completely different thoughts on how to live, diet, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. They had a little argument just recently about buying a son a cooking set. And I'm like, when I was young, that would have never been even an idea to buy a male child something that is viewed as feminine. And I know cooking is not feminine. You could take, my wife, my wife showed my son some stuff in cooking. I was shown by my mom some things in cooking. There's nothing wrong with that. There are so many male chefs, but the apron and all that different stuff as a child. A lot of times when a child is doing that and playing with those toys, who are they emulating? The father or the mother? Likely the mother. And when you facilitate that, from my perspective, it doesn't diminish, it grows. I may be wrong, but I was raised by my mom, so, I talk a lot. Some may say, oh, well, he's apt to gossip. I'm not gossiping, but I just like to talk because the women around me talked all the time. Most people say, well, you're not a normal man because most men don't like to talk as much as you do. But I was raised around talking. They communicated. Now, it may not have been the nicest communication. It was a lot of harsh stuff, but talking was normal. My grandmama would sit up playing dominoes with me, talking with me, playing cards with me, talking with me. Yeah, a lot of it was chastisement, but talking was something that was normal. So I communicate well. I feel like I do. I like to talk. I'd rather talk than text. But that makes people uncomfortable. But what you're around affects you. A boy seeing his mother with a hand on his hip, likelihood he might model himself and do that. I know of a situation that was just like that. If mama popping gum, he was popping gum and all that different stuff. And Richard, I shouldn't even say his name. He's deceased now, but he became very much feminine. He did a lot like his mama. His mama was my babysitter as a child and stuff like that, and was actually the one who introduced me to marijuana as a child. But I didn't do what my mama did as far as those things. But as far as the talking, I did. I don't think I had the mannerism, but some people said I had a weak wrist, that I held my hand like that, and I'm like, maybe I got that from my mom. I don't know. I was a mama's boy for a long time, until we moved in with my grandmom, and then, I still was a mama's boy, but my mama was not able to be the mama all the time because she was always at work. So, I didn't have many men pouring into me. And the men that I did have pouring into me, I was stealing time there from someone else. So, that ain't, yeah, that wasn't always beneficial in the end. I'm thankful for what had happened and what occurred, getting those times of conversation, but I stole that time. And so, sometimes I look back at it and my vantage point changed because, I love that man that poured into me, but I definitely never wanted to take or steal that time from my childhood friend. And so I see that even today, 49 years old for me and 50 for him, that it still has hindered our relationship. There's still hostility. I've forgiven a lot of the stuff or whatever, and it's not hurt, but it doesn't matter. I love the person, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to love regardless, but I don't know if it's mutual, and nor does it matter. A lot of times, we so focused on, what other people feel about us, and I do get caught up in that sometimes, but the better vantage point is Yah's vantage point. What does he see in you? Does he see an agent of forgiveness in you? Does he see someone that's willing to grow? Someone that's seeking to endure to the end? Does he see someone who's trying to right their wrongs? Does he see someone who's open to grow? his vantage point is the greatest vantage point. Ours has a bias to it. The experiences that we have influence those things. His vantage point is pure because he sees it all. I'm thankful to Yahuwah that I've had these 49 years and that my vantage points have not stayed, I guess, static or, just concrete. A lot of my vantage points have been able to change through the years because I'm open to the Ruach HaKodesh. The Holy Spirit is what most people would call. But I'm thankful. And I hope that many who have a vantage point of me, I don't want to dictate how you see me. That's your choice. I used to want to dictate it, but no. But maybe you can turn that lens over to Yah and let him minister to you so that you can see me how he sees me and move accordingly. Look at others through the lens of Yahuwah. Navigate life and everything around you through his focus, his vantage point, his perspective, so that you can bless those he blessed. And, we're not the ones supposed to curse. He'll curse them. But we can know to get out of Dodge from people that he has his eyes on to destroy so that we don't fall prey to that. I thank you for this moment. I'm going to pray out. Abba Yah, I thank you for your high priest Yahusha, who was also sacrificed. Thank you that was put in place in motion so that I and your nation, Israel, can awaken. The awakening process is not complete. We're, still yet in it. But I pray that we have the vantage point to see what you are doing, to see how you've seen the end from the beginning. So much of this thing that is going on is directly from you. But yet we see it as from, this people, that people, this system. But you allow these things to get us closer so that we'll call you up, call out your name. Those things that are used as the belt of your chastening, those people, let us not have hate. Yes, we could be guarded. Yes, we could have our vantage point and perspective so that we see them and know that, we need to see and know that they were used by you. Even though they abused that, we need to see that as well so that we don't, in turn, do the same. When we return to the place of head and no longer the tail, we don't want to be abusive in our stewardship. We want to be ones that maintain and go about things properly and from your perspective and not our own. I thank you for this time and this live. Let it end and let it be a blessing to whoever hears it. Blessings and shalom. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.